And at the end of the workout, these two guys come next to me and they're like, "How is your sensor? Does it work well for the glucose and triathlon?" And I'm looking like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. This sensor is for diabetes, but it's great that the first time someone look at me with the sensor and doesn't identify as a person that is sick, but as a triathlete. I felt like I could not deal with diabetes anymore. It was just like too much. So I was putting that at the side. I was just trying to not think about diabetes, not think about insulin, and I would just eat everything was in front of me, in the fridge, in the house, outside, until I was like losing consciousness. So there was a deep, dark moment.
Today's guest brings together science, sports, and storytelling in a truly unique way. Eleonora Campagnoli is a triathlete, a scientist, and an author. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 3. She grew up in Italy and now lives in Amsterdam, where she combines a successful professional career with her activities as a speaker and diabetes coach. Training for triathlons takes a lot of time and dedication, but she somehow also managed to author a very interesting book called Nutrition and Sport with Diabetes, which explores the relationship between food, training, and blood sugar management from both a scientific and a personal perspective. I'm also a triathlete and I was fascinated by her book, so I've been looking forward to speaking to her about my favorite topic, diabetes and sports. Eleonora, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. I'm super grateful to be invited in your podcast, and thanks for the beautiful words you use to describe me. Indeed, I'm a triathlete and I have diabetes since 1999, so since I was 3 years old. And of course, there has been a lot of ups and downs in the diabetes management and in the mindset, but sport is always what saves me, and different kind of sport that I did through my life until now.
Let's discover that a little bit. So, you've been living with type 1 diabetes, like you said, since you were very young. Could you tell me how it all started? And do you remember anything from that time?
So everything started when I was 3 years old. And of course, I don't remember that much, but I remember at some point a run in the hospital. I remember that I was home, actually eating a sort of Kinder Ferrero snack, and my mom taking me and just we ran in the hospital, running through this long corridor. And I remember arriving in a hospital bed with a balloon, and I was just there, and I couldn't understand what was happening, and I was very hungry, and I was asking for food, and they eventually gave me a piece of banana that it was like such a treat because I was in very high hyperglycemia, almost ketoacidosis. So they diagnosed me, let's say, in time, not to have bad effect on the brain. So I remember it was a really stressful time for my parents. In 1999, there was no technology, there was no pumps. It was like very long needles to inject a baby of 3 years old, and you had to mix the insulin. At the time, there was only one type. So it was a really different world. Maybe you remember it as well. So quite
Yes.
traumatic. But I have to say, my parents did an amazing job.
Yeah, I mean, the diabetes management has evolved so much over the years. I mean, back then, indeed, it was still the needles and pre-mixing the insulin. I remember I was diagnosed also in the 90s. And yeah, that was that was something else. And you grew up in Italy, so for many, Italy is the country of pasta, pizza, risotto, and yeah, I would say a lot of carbs in general. So how did you manage that as a child?
Yeah, so it's true. And even worse, let's say worse or better, my mom family side come from the south around Naples. So the culture of food and sitting around the table is really important for us. And eating is a way to show that you are enjoying the time with your family. So, of course, I remember the struggle of everybody looking into my plate to see, is she eating too much? Is she eating too little? Because of course they were concerned, but still I grew up as a baby and then as a teenager and trying to be a woman until like I left at 23, and everybody was like looking at my plate. So it was pretty stressful, the time of eating. That will bring me after to some eating disorder, but to stay on the topic of your question, it was difficult because I also wanted to manage what I wanted to eat, so maybe not eat too much. And there was a clash with the Italian culture of eating lots of carbs, eating a lot, show that you are appreciating. So it's been challenging for sure, but I found my dimension battling against my family, let's say, and try to bring a new way of looking at nutrition in diabetes. So I was already manifesting against a lot of carbs and saying these are not good for me. I know that the doctors say you can eat whatever you want and just inject insulin, but I'm telling you, to my family, I'm telling you guys, this is not the best. I can optimize my diabetes and my insulin units, and it makes me feel better. Again, as a disclaimer of what I will say today, what I do is not the best strategy for everyone. It's my strategy, and you can take maybe the structure and try to use it for yourself. So I'm not giving medical advice. But yeah, I thought that for me, maybe reducing the amount of carbs, especially when I was not training, was better.
So you mentioned um, eating disorders, so the situation you had with food when you had diabetes actually led to a eating disorder. Do you want to elaborate on that? Are you willing to tell us a bit more about this?
That is a very sensitive part of my growing up, of my story. But I know that lots of people, lots of women with diabetes especially suffer from that. Lots of women without diabetes suffer from eating disorders because of the world we are living in and the social media and the pressure to be, look amazing. So imagine someone with diabetes that has to be strict and pay attention on the diet and gaining weight easier because of the insulin. And women are already, more prone to have body fat compared to men. So it was always difficult for me to maintain ideal body type for our society and try to also survive and live as a normal woman with diabetes. So when in life at some point everything becomes too much, maybe work situation, maybe family situation, of a breakup with the boyfriend. And for me it was like I broke up with the boyfriend at the time. I moved to Rome to study medicine. I wanted to come back to Turin because my family was there. As soon as I came back to Turin, I broke up. My grandparents passed away in the same year. My parents divorced in the same year, so it was a lot. And I felt like I could not deal with diabetes anymore. It was just like too much. So I was putting that at the side and probably losing the love for myself as a main focus. That is something that I would like to stress today. Loving yourself is the first thing, and maybe sometimes being a bit egocentric and selfish is important, especially with diabetes. But coming back to the eating disorder, yeah, I was just trying to not think about diabetes, not think about insulin, and I would just eat everything was in front of me, in the fridge, in the house, outside, until I was like losing consciousness. So there was a deep, dark moment.
Wow, that's yeah, that's quite a story. So, and how old were you then at that point?
I was 18 years old until till 20, so a couple of years to get out of it.
So you were, yeah, you were actually in a deep hole at that point. So how did you eventually get yourself out of there?
So multiple things helped me. Um, I started doing therapy for some years, and that of course helped. Having professional help is always the first things, both for diabetes management and also for mental health, because Diabetes is a pretty tricky disease that we don't see, but is there and is there with us the whole day. So it's pretty mentally demanding. And as I said, when there are other things, it's life get in the way, diabetes suddenly is heavier. So getting support maybe all through our life is not something that we have to be shamed about, but is absolutely normal. And I think it's great also to admit that we have some limits. So therapy was one of the things that helped me. My family tried to support me the best they could, but when you suffer and you are in a deep hole, you can only see your own pain. And most of the time, you don't see the pain of the people around you. And you don't see the effort that they're doing to make you feel better. You're just so focused on your pain that nothing can bring you up. So ultimately, it came from myself, came from that's enough. And I want to change my life. So I moved to the Netherlands, leaving Italy. And when you find yourself alone in a new place without a safety net, suddenly something changes your mind. I cannot pass out anymore in the street. There is no one now to get me home. So eventually a drastic change, of course, after years of help and feeling already a bit better, it was what made me come out of that.
So yeah, really a change of environment, a change of life, basically that helped you to reset that situation. You're also, of course, now a triathlete, but back then as a child, were you into sports at all? And how did people basically around you think about activity and diabetes?
So in 1999, as you can also remember, at the time, not much was known about, lots of sport and diabetes. Actually, the guidelines was to be very careful around sport, maybe not do too much to avoid hypoglycemia. There were no sensors, so what you could do is measure before, during, and after. But I was never scared of being as everybody else. And I have to thank also my family and my father to make me do sport. Actually, the mentality of my father was like, you have to be able to do everything in life, even sport wise, because you don't know. You can be in any situation and you have to know how to do it. So you don't have to be a pro athlete in everything, but you have to know how to ski, how to windsurf, how to roller skate, run, swim, whatever. So we literally tried every kind of sport, and I'm really glad. And sometimes even do things a bit differently. For example, if I was a kid and we were in the playground, and my father was like, let's not do like everybody else, going up the stair and go down the slope. Why you don't do the same path like outside? So you climb outside the slope and then you go down in a totally different way. So I start seeing things also a bit different and a bit more challenging, that eventually was like how my life would be. Maybe I would do the same thing, but in a slightly more complex way, but I would still finish the game. So my approach to sport, thanks to my family, was I can do everything. I can do it in my own pace, maybe a bit different from others, but without being scared of diabetes. So my life has always been very active. Since I was a kid, I did classical dancing for a lot of years. I took some certification in ballet. So I did some official exam in the academy. And then from ballet, I moved to swimming. So I started swimming competition in middle school and then swimming competition in high school with a team federated by the Italian Federation. And then I moved to triathlon in the Netherlands.
So you tried out a lot of different sports. So nice to hear, by the way, that you had that support from your father to try so many things. It must have made you also kind of an expert in different sports. So you mentioned now that you switched to triathlon at the end. So what drew you to triathlon specifically? The swimming, the biking, the running. You said you did already some swimming before. But when did you decide then to commit to it more seriously?
Yeah, that's a really nice question. So True, I was doing the swimming competition, so swimming was my strength. Running, I was doing some running races in Italy with some friends that I had in the gym. I was doing a lot of gym. I did some Spartan races. I was like playing tennis, paddle in the free time. So really every kind of sport. Regarding biking, I was just like a leisure biker with my family. So I never had a racing bike, just like some mountain bikes, and that's it. So what happened was that I arrived in Amsterdam and I joined a competitive swimming team. Then I moved house and I left the swimming team and I went just swimming by myself in an Olympic pool, 50-meter, and I was in the fast lane in my swim costume and with my sensor in the arm. And I was swimming and I was trying to chase the fastest guys in the lane. So we were really swimming together. And at the end of the workout, these two guys come next to me and they're like, "How is the Super Sapiens?" And I'm like, "What are they talking about?" "Yeah, how is your sensor? Does it work well for the glucose and triathlon?" And I'm looking and like, "I'm not sure what you're talking about. This sensor is for diabetes, but it's great that the first time someone look at me with the sensor and doesn't identify, I don't identify as a person that is sick, but as a triathlete." So I said, "No, I'm not a triathlete." And he said, "Well, your swim is great. I think you should join our triathlon club." So they gave me the name, I researched it, and these two guys are still my friends, Jose and Nikki. Jose has also been my triathlon coach for my 70.3. So I joined because of them, because they thought I was a triathlete, but I was just a girl with diabetes.
Yeah, so you were discovered actually because of your diabetes, and you found out about triathlon because you have diabetes. So at least something good came out of diabetes.
Indeed.
So so you've been racing, you've been training a lot. So what if you look back, what achievement in sports so far are you most proud of? Is there any competition or event that you take that you look back on and say, "Hey, wow, I did it."
Of course, there are lots of events that I'm proud of, and also my 70.3. But I'm also proud of every training. Every training that we bring home with diabetes is an achievement because the race, the 70.3, yeah, is a big event. But before that, we simulate multiple times similar distances, right? Or even longer bike ride or even longer run sometimes. So it's challenging. And when you finish a race, we always let's say, "Oh, was not that difficult, was not that much," like to minimize kind of what we did. But it's a lot. It's a lot what we did, even without diabetes. The training is a lot. So just like for our audience that maybe is not all top athletes, what you are doing that can be a small run or a bit longer bike ride with diabetes is already an achievement. And take it, internalize that, and be happy about that. Because starting there and then, you can build up on a bigger race. I will always, to come back to your question, remember my first triathlon. I always wanted to do a triathlon. I don't know why, but I always thought I want to do a triathlon. And I subscribed in the Tri Amsterdam. That is a local race. We swim in the Amstel, so with the beautiful scenery of Amsterdam. We bike kind of in the center of Amsterdam and we run between the nice canals. And when I finished that, I was like, I did it. And I still feel emotional now, like, cannot believe I completed it. So the first race will be always unforgettable, even if it's not a long race or a full Ironman. Doesn't matter. It's just like you can do it.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. I mean, I will always remember my first race, but for not so great reasons because it was horrible. Because that was the first big event I ever did, and I just had high sugars all the time, and I suffered, and was dehydrated, and ended up on a basically a hospital bed at the end. But I also will always remember it because it was that moment when I was lying there on that bed and was thinking, how can I change this? How do I manage this? How do I make this better? And in that way, for me, it was also the first race will always stay with me. And yeah, so I can speak from my own experience and say that triathlon is definitely not the easiest sport to choose, especially if you've type 1 diabetes. But were there like moments where you doubted whether you could do triathlon or intense training with type 1 diabetes? I was doubting when I was lying on that hospital bed for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, this is such a good question. And I question every day if triathlon is the best sport for diabetes type 1. And to be honest, I'm not sure I have like the best answer or the real answer. A part of me says that it's not the best sport because long hours of sport, of course, bring more challenges and difficulties on the diabetes management. So if we want to have a perfect timing range or timing tight range, then nowadays is what we won't look at. So even like tighter the range of glucose, maybe 70, 140 milligram DL, being exposed in such a long training and long races might bring the glucose to be out of range and more stress. So probably is not the best. Probably what would be the best is having a non-stress life, very chill with lots of hours of sleep. Then you do your workout 2 hours after waking up when your morning hormones went down and you do a sort of zone 2, zone 3 training. So that would be probably the best for a diabetes type 1. But we want to live the life and we want to do what we like. So if triathlon is something that we like, is a compromise, is a give and take. So for me, triathlon is a challenge, and maybe I won't reach the 99% timing range. So probably my glucose level won't be as good as someone that does some weightlifting and some walks, because we know it's a bit easier to control, right? Still not easy, but a bit easier than hours of endurance sport. So this is my answer. I'm not sure if it's the best sport, but if you enjoy it, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think triathlon can be a good sport for some people with diabetes because it forces you to train a lot and to train often. Because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to triathlon and not going to do swim training, right? That's not triathlon. So that in a way that keeps, because you're training often and you have to train often, it keeps your insulin sensitivity quite high, and that makes it sometimes easier to process your meals, will lower your insulin levels in general. So in a way it can be, I think, but it requires a lot of discipline, dedication, and time to do triathlon training, also for people who do not have diabetes, of course. So it needs to fit into your life. If it doesn't fit into your life, it's not going to be your sport. And yeah, talking about like the things like insulin sensitivity, you studied microbiology, if I'm not mistaken, and oncology. So you're also a scientist, right? In your book, I noticed that you also showed that you have a strong knowledge of like the nutritional aspects of diabetes. So how has your scientific background influenced how you think about diabetes management? Do you use like the science every day in your diabetes management? How do you look at that?
So actually, my scientific background helped me. That is like a degree in molecular biotechnology and then oncology. Helped me to understand what exactly I'm doing, because having awareness on what we are eating, the macronutrient that we're eating, and the absorption of what we are eating, if you really understand that, I feel like my diabetes management is easier than just trying to freestyle and do some counting of carbs. So I started studying, not because of diabetes. I went into science, but because I was really passionate about it. And I started studying the insulin effect on glucose. So insulin is an hormone that when we inject it, it opens some receptors on the top of the cell called GLUT4, and the glucose can enter the cells. So insulin is literally something that allows us to internalize glucose and have energy. And this is great. So insulin is a great hormone. Absolutely, we need it in our life. Although we also have to say that the insulin response is less great. And insulin response is like that extra insulin that unfortunately, as with diabetes, sometimes we have because we are not a machine and we try our best. So the insulin response is what makes us be more hungry all the time. So stimulate the sense of hunger and we want to eat more. Or the insulin response is the inflammation in our body that we can have because of the fat accumulation. So insulin is also a hormone that unfortunately create fat accumulation, and we can see that in the area of injection, for example. So this is a sort of vicious cycle because the more insulin we do, the more hungry we are, the more fat accumulation we have. And we know that fat tissue is something that promotes inflammation, and fat tissue requires more insulin, so will stimulate insulin resistance. So understanding this, coming back to your question from my background of science, made me realize, okay, how can I optimize my insulin management knowing this? So I have to start from the lifestyle, as you said, moving every day, and triathlon is great because forces you to do something every day. And moving means that the muscle will absorb glucose. So they become more receptive to glucose. And this means I need less insulin for the same amount of sugar. That is great. And then shape my nutrition. So how should I eat in a smart way to avoid excessive unit of insulin that I do need, but eat what I need to train and not too much to not require extra insulin that will bring me maybe in hypoglycemia. So for sure, my science background made me do a deeper reflection on that and study deeply the macronutrients that I'm eating.
Not everybody has that same scientific background, of course. But yeah, it's interesting to understand the processes that are actually at work in your body. If you look at your own diabetes management, would you say that because of this knowledge that you have, are you managing your diabetes very strictly, precisely? Are you carb counting? How do you work with that?
Yeah, so let's say when I'm in race mode or like training for a race, I become suddenly very, very strict. But also in general, with like when we are dieting, it's not that you can diet the whole year. It goes in phases, right? You have a target and you are more strict. Maybe you want to reduce fat mass or build muscle and then reduce fat mass. And then you have to loosen up at some point. If you are strict the whole life, it just doesn't work. At some point, you will lose it, let's say. But with diabetes, it's something else because you don't want completely loosen up, right? And here I will bring like the example of my cardiologist that told me, Eleonora, you can run a marathon, but you are running a marathon and you're already like starting last because of diabetes. And you have to know that. And every time you decide to eat something that you should not, or have an extra glass of wine or sleep less because you are partying, is all fine. It can happen, but this will add to your marathon results couple of extra minutes, and it's fine if you want to take it. But if not, every time you know that you are being a bit like more injured compared to the others. So to answer your question, I try to actually be quite strict with my diabetes management. I try to respect a diet high in protein, calculated like for my body weight with around 1.5 gram or 2 grams of protein for my body weight when I'm doing training for a race or most of the year. Lower in carbs. That doesn't mean no carbs at all. I think carbs are fundamental for fueling and performing. So I think to race and perform, the guidelines as normal athletes, let's call it like that, is what works also for people with diabetes. Depends, of course, distinction of women and men and the type of race and the length of race and intensity. But what I mostly do is around 30 to 40 grams of carb per hour. if I'm in endurance training or race, I try to do, let's say, less than the men and maybe a bit less than the women guidelines because I prefer integrating a bit more if needed instead of over integrating and then go in hyperglycemia. So I'm pretty strict with my nutrition on a daily basis and try to be strict on the nutrition also while I train.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting what you say. Of course, yeah, in a race situation, um, well, any athlete will need to be aware of what he or she is eating and when and how much they should be eating. But yeah, for someone with type 1 diabetes, this becomes even more important. It's not easy to manage your glucose during an intensive event. And if you don't think about it in advance, it can go wrong. So you have to be, like you say, quite strict with these races. And sometimes you can be a bit more flexible outside of that. I think it's also important to, like you say, you cannot be in race mode all the time. You cannot be on a diet all the time. It's also very important. But of course, even when we prepare everything, things can go wrong because, yeah, there are also more unpredictable parts, I would say, of diabetes. How do you deal with that? Do you get disappointed, for instance, if you're high that despite all of your preparation and your strict guidelines that you followed and you still go high or you still have a hypo on a race?
Right.
How do you deal with that?
Indeed, yes. Because I'm maybe you could understand this from my way of describing how I manage diabetes. I'm a perfectionist and I demand a lot from myself. So I want to do the best all the time. And this is frustrating. It's good because it makes me be quite strict, but it's also frustrating when you don't achieve your goals. So there are a couple of things that influence the diabetes management. One of them, very important, is sleep. So for me, maybe I'm like a baby, but I really need like 9 hours of sleep. 9 hours of sleep, sometimes even 10, for me is really regenerating. And I see the day after that my insulin sensitivity is higher and my glucose is just way more stable. So if I don't get a good night of sleep before a big training day or a big race, and can happen because you are stressed or maybe there are other factors, that is your family, your work, I really see it the day after and I get frustrated, of course. And the only thing I can do is just try to manage as much I can, probably increasing the insulin doses. We saw that the effect of stress can be like doubling the doses or even tripling the doses. So that is one thing. Another thing that influence is, of course, the period. So the menstrual cycle for women, that is a complete different topic and bigger topic. So depending on the phase of the menstrual cycle, I train differently and I try to eat differently. So that also influence my frustration level because at race, you don't decide when it is. It can be in a good moment or it can be in a terrible moment for a woman that usually is in the luteal phase. So when you are getting more tired because your period is about to come. So the body is really stressed out and burned out for that. The nutrition is really important. So the day before you had too many drinks or eat a bit too much, then maybe you had the high glucose in the night, you see the day after. You had a roller coaster of up and down. So again, is something frustrating that you have to manage the day after. Again, maybe increasing a bit the insulin doses or try to restrict a bit the diet. So what I do is try to be as strict as I can, although sometimes it's not possible because I also want a pizza or a piece of cake, and then I take the consequences of that and I try to tell myself, well, I know why it's like that. Like I had the piece of cake, so now it's high glucose, so I don't have to be frustrated. I want it, I accepted it, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's also important to do that. And it's interesting also that you mentioned, for instance, sleep as one of the factors, because that's something that many people will often forget that this is also important if you have type 1 diabetes. Also, if you don't have type 1 diabetes, but you don't have the direct feedback so much from your body, And in a way, that's one of the advantages, so to say, we have. We get direct feedback about our lifestyle from our glucose levels. Of course, to manage your diabetes that well, that strictly, you need good technology. What technology do you use to manage your diabetes?
So I started with pens, indeed, because I have diabetes since 99. So that was the only way of going. And I never had too much difficulties with pens because, indeed, of a very active lifestyle. So my insulin doses were never too high. Now I'm actually considering, after lots of years with pens and a brief couple of years with a pump, to go back to a patch pump. So I'm actually thinking about Omnipod 5 with Dexcom G7. At the moment, I just have pens, so Tresiba and Fiasp, and see how it goes with that. Because I've been with the Novo Nordisk Pro Cyclist. I was invited to their training camp in Italy, and it was great to see these kids, most of them with pumps that try to be pro cyclist. So that gave me lots of strength and willingness to put a pump again.
Yeah, it's good to see the example of how other people are doing, especially such professional teams. You can learn from that. You can really learn from that. So you've been managing diabetes intensely since the age of 3. Do you feel that despite all the negative things that come with diabetes, has it given you also, I would say, psychological strengths, maybe resilience or discipline or awareness about your body that other athletes may not have? Is that something that you sometimes think about?
I think I wouldn't be as I am today without diabetes. Um, has to be a mix of like my character and diabetes itself, of course. But one thing that diabetes taught me is to be happier. And you're like, happier? Are you not more sad? I'm like, no, really, because I understand my challenges and my limitation. And I'm happier for small things because I can do it. And I'm like, yes, this is great. I'm just happier for smaller achievement. Then for sure is one thing that diabetes taught me. And also the discipline and the resilience. So keep going and keep going because it's good for me. So sometimes people, they have a goal and they don't manage to achieve it. Or like, I want to start the gym. I want to lose a couple of kilos. And they just see the end goal. But end goal is not sufficient as to be something that you identify to achieve it. So I identify as athletes and I do it because it's good for me. So it's a deeper reason to achieve your goals. So that is what makes me keep going. And because diabetes is there, I want to do it because I want to arrive in the future as healthy as I can and see my kids and maybe see a cure one day. So diabetes taught me resilience, determination, to be happier. And yeah, I wouldn't have written a book without diabetes. Maybe I wouldn't do triathlon because I wanted to prove everybody wrong that I can do it. So I think it gave me lots of positive things.
Yeah. So talking about that book, you've written that book about sports and diabetes. What was your motivation to write it?
So I started writing actually a diary or some notes for myself while I was preparing for my 70.3. And I actually wrote it in English first language because I was sharing these notes with my triathlon coach. And I was writing my whole progression. So where I started on, let's say, weight wise or muscle mass, BMI. So I was tracking everything. Indeed, you can see it in the books. I was tracking my nutrition before, during, and after the triathlon. I was tracking my progress. So everything was written down. So that was like the most technical part. So it was not meant to be a book. But when I crossed the finish line on my first triathlon, that I got a bit emotional, as I said before, I wrote a part that it was like my deeper thoughts and how grateful I was, and at the same time how tired I was for all these struggles. And I started sharing this with a couple of people, and they told me, your way of writing is really incisive. Like, you give us your feelings and you give us a lot of strength, and you made me want to run again. So lots of people start telling me that, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I can actually help some people with what I did. And the real reason why I wrote this book is because before my race, the 70.3, I went online and I looked people with diabetes doing 70.3. And there are a couple of people writing a sort of vlog or what they did, but it was very general. Like, it's the race day and probably everything goes wrong and the glucose was really high. And I was like, okay, well, this doesn't help me that much. I would love to read about someone that started from zero and completed it. And I want to read the failures, and I want to read what it did and what it did wrong, not to copy paste, as I said before, but to understand the structure and the way of thinking. So the book is really something that want to motivate, but also want to help, want to coach, and want to inspire, with the good reason of fundraising for Fondazione Italiana Diabete. So it's an Italian foundation that looks for the final cure for diabetes. So part of the royalties will go to them.
Wow. So yeah, it was, you say initially was basically to clarify your road strategy with your personal notes. But yeah, as you were writing, it became more and more about helping other people with diabetes. So that's also a nice shift. I mean, that's I think what makes your book powerful in the end. You are also able to inspire other people and help them in their journey when they are looking at being active.
Yeah, it's not just like, can be all very technical on what I did, only regarding triathlon. Like, what I received as feedback that is nice, that this book can be read on multiple layers. A layers that is more technical, or a layers that is more motivating, or even layers that is more like personal, because every chapter starts with a personal story. So swimming, okay, but what brought me there? What was the feeling while swimming? What were the challenges while swimming? And all of these anecdotes that people with diabetes experience every day, and putting it in writing. And a lot of people say, yes, what you wrote there is exactly how I feel it. And maybe I could try this way, is what made me keep writing it, and publish the book.
I think that's a great motivation to do it. As you said, so your book also suggests like the strong link between nutrition, sport, and diabetes peaks. So if you get everything right, it will also go well in sports. Can you maybe share a story where perfect preparation or nutritional timing made a big difference in how you felt or performed?
Yeah. So already this is a long process to have everything optimized, and start, of course, from small training and then bigger, longer, more difficult trainings. So I was preparing for my 70.3 with my triathlon coach. And what I was trying to do is to perfect the amount of carbohydrates that I need for a specific time and duration of different trainings. So we know that if you are training in zone 1, so a very low heart rate, like walking, you will burn mainly fat, let's say, and your glucose will go down a little bit, but not too much and not very fast. Of course, depend if you have insulin on board at the time, then will go down faster, or other factor. But let's say in a standardized condition where there is no insulin on board from a bolus, you only have a basal insulin. Then I start doing some activities in zone 2. So I start noticing that while running, biking, or swimming, if I was in zone 2, my glucose will start going down, on a sort of not very rapid decrease, but going down. So I was thinking, okay, how much carb exactly do I need to keep my glucose stable while I do a zone 2 activities? And I did multiple tests because depends. If you're running, I saw that I'm burning more faster. If I'm swimming, I'm burning less. And cycling also is less than running. So I did an estimation. For example, for running, I need 15 grams of carbohydrates every 40 minutes if I do a zone 2 activity. And I was writing this in an Excel table and trying to create a sort of algorithm to understand this. Then if you go on a zone 3 activity, then your heart rate, called tempo, is a bit higher. You can sustain this for a long time. I saw that suddenly my body required more carbs than a zone 2 activity. So for this, I would need 30 grams of carbohydrates every 45 minutes to an hour. So I start understanding this until a longer duration of the sport helped me optimize some of my races. I had an example of longer bike rides. We did 260-kilometer bike rides where my glucose went really well. So it was an endurance bike ride. So it was a zone 2, zone 3, so a tempo one. And I kept integrating every 45 minutes with carbohydrates and some protein. And I saw my glucose stay really stable. So that study brings me still today that I will go for a bike ride at lunchtime to feel comfortable and feel safe in my integration strategy.
So you really analyze how your body responds to carbs during exercise, and you, as you said, you created your own algorithm to basically find out how many carbs should I eat to make this possible and keep good glucose management. But do you think that that is something that every person with type 1 diabetes can do? Or do you suggest that such people get guidance or help with that? Because it can seem quite daunting. I think if you hear about creating an Excel table and keeping all the data, maybe not everybody wants to do that or has the time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really time consuming and really stressful because you are looking at the best glucose. So indeed, to do that, for who would like to try, that is listening to us, is try to have a standardized condition. So you try always to train, let's say, at the same time for the same sport repeatedly, maybe for a couple of weeks, a month or two. So every day at 10 a.m., I go running. I try not to have insulin on board. I try to have the same breakfast. I try to have the same kind of range of starting glucose, and I'm aiming for the same final glucose. And of course, there will be attempt. Sometimes I integrate a bit more, sometimes I integrate a bit less. But when you fine tune this, you can have indeed your strategy for every different sport, and that has to be repeated for the different training zones. As I said before, it's not that easy because if there is stress, sickness, menstrual cycle, poor sleep, then they're all variables that could influence the result of the test. But, we have time. We can try multiple times to optimize it. But if you don't want to do it, because indeed it's time consuming, I put a table in my book ready to be filled in. So you can try to do this attempt and can be already a guidance, let's say no-brainer or less brainer to try to optimize your nutrition a bit better.
Yeah, that's nice if you can give people some tools indeed to take that on themselves. And it's basically, like you say, it's about creating a structure that works for you and finding out what is your structure. And once you have that structure in place, it's something I also experience. It becomes easier because it becomes natural to do that. I mean, it becomes part of your training routine to manage your insulin, manage your carbs in the same way every time, because you do generally do similar training sessions multiple times over the weeks. So it initially it can seem like scary and daunting and quite a big thing to do. But once you get used to it, it just becomes easier, I would say.
When we look at sport and diabetes can be pretty tricky and be like every time is something different and frustrating. But if sport enters your day every day, suddenly it's no more something difficult and scary. It becomes a habit. And a habit is something that we repeat and it's like no brainer and it's exactly what we want because we have our strategy in place and these offload lots of stress for someone with diabetes.
Yeah. It's one element I would like to get into a little bit more, um, because I think it was very interesting. You've spoken and written about how female athletes face unique challenges in managing diabetes due to these hormonal fluctuations. Could you maybe explain in a bit more detail how the menstrual cycle impacts training, glucose levels, and performance, and mainly how you personally adapt to that?
Yeah. So starting a bit from like science, not go too much in details. The menstrual cycle can be divided in three phases. The first part, let's say the first 5 days, that is the bleeding phase. Then we have a follicular phase and then a luteal phase. So in the bleeding phase, actually, our hormones go down. So apart from having, cramps and maybe discomfort, is a good time to race and a good time to perform. Actually, it's not how we believe that we should, rest in this time. I remember already my swimming coach when I was in high school so long time ago. I had a swim competition and I said, okay, oh, I don't know, I'm on my period. And he said, don't worry, it's a good time for you to race. And since that moment, I was like, okay, let me do a bit of research actually, because I can train it different for that. Then there is the second phase, that is the follicular phase. And in this phase, actually, the body can take a bit more kilocalories, so we can eat a bit more because we need that. We sleep better, so we fall asleep faster and we have a better sleep nights. And we can train higher intensity, so higher zones and push in sprint and maximal effort. While in the luteal phase, we start getting tired, we are preparing for the menstrual cycle, for the bleeding, so our body cannot take high loads. So it's good to reduce the loads and reduce the intensity. This will also bring us to have less good sleep. We will probably wake up more in the night, be less rested, be more stressed, more mood swings, and actually would be good to try to reduce in calories. In this phase, I didn't touch on glucose, but indeed in the luteal phase, what is seen also from scientific articles that was indeed reading in the past few days is proven that there is more insulin resistance, indeed, because these higher hormone, progesterone, estrogen are in the female body. So there is insulin resistance that will make us do higher doses of insulin. Is even seen that it duplicates or triplicates the doses of insulin compared to the bleeding phase or the luteal phase. So this means that also on a training perspective, would be good not to push against our body that is already tired and try to deload, take like as a rest week and do some zone 1, zone 2 activity, long walk, yoga, easy runs, easy bike rides. So said this, what I also try to adapt on my training is try to push in the first 2 weeks and a half. So do more higher tempo and zone 4, zone 5 trainings, intensity, and eat a bit more. And then try to deload in the final week and a half. So less push and listen to my body, give a bit more rest, be a bit more gentle, and try to decrease foods that are rich in fats and carbohydrates to, let's say, not increase too much the insulin dose. Of course, increase it a bit because it's normal, physiologic, but try to remain with a constant units throughout the month.
Yeah, that's interesting that you basically matched up your training cycle with your menstrual cycle, basically to make it work for you. Of course, if you're racing, that's harder because you would have to basically plan your race in the right
Yeah.
week in a way.
Yes.
So that can be challenging, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. What I was saying before, that is not always possible. So you also have to, go with it. Maybe the race will be not in the best moment, but that is also, fine, part of it. Some people say that is also mental, and the mindset in the end plays a big part. So we can still perform very good even if we are in the luteal phase. So I agree with that. But I think for the whole time through the year, this is proven that women should adapt their training based on the menstrual cycle. And actually, we already gave a couple of talks inside my triathlon club. So not for people with diabetes, for women that are just, triathletes without diabetes. And they will also follow this guideline.
Yeah, and then also important for type 1 diabetics is then the impact it has on insulin sensitivity, which is of course something that people without diabetes won't have to worry about. So I didn't know about these things. What do you think still needs to change in research, coaching, or diabetes education, maybe, to better support female athletes living with type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, actually, I recently spoke with one of our Italian athletes, a female athlete. She's a runner in the national team. And I was saying, look, but are you training differently from the men? And she's like, no, not really. I was like, okay, well, I'm not sure. This may be a problem. We should have more competent coaches that differentiate the training. And when I went to the Novo Nordisk team, I asked them about a female cycling athletes team. And they also told me, for females is a completely different things and we will need lots of different expertise compared to the men. So I think we have this awareness and we don't have sometimes resources to have two different types of training for men and female. So for sure has to change because I also still think in high level this is not properly done yet for people without diabetes. And for people with diabetes, I think this is really important. So it should be adapted, studied more, and have some coaches, so some maybe fitness coaches or personal trainer that start researching more on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, there needs to be more attention to these things, especially as you say, in a coaching environment. Yeah, you would expect that people, especially coaches at a high level, working with high level athletes, would take that into account and consider that. So, looking at everything we said, what advice do you have for someone with type 1 diabetes thinking about doing sports but still feeling a bit unsure?
So my suggestion, because I've been there, like to be unsure about what I should do. Should I pursue it? Should I go for it? When I did my first triathlon, I went to the doctor here in the Netherlands and I said, I'm going to do half Ironman. And he looked at me, he's like, oh, let me know how it goes. I'm like, oh, I was actually looking for like some advice. It's like, no, tell me how it goes and what you do. So sometimes you can feel a bit lost and lonely on sport with diabetes. The message that I want to give is not to feel discouraged and try and fail. And one of the my favorite quotes is like, in life you never fail. Either you win or you learn. And I learned a lot. So for who doesn't feel ready yet, is like, don't see it as a failure, see it as a learning. And who knows how many nice things can come from it, as like writing a book or just maybe sharing your experience to your family, friends, or just for yourself. Be proud of what you do. Try to be really aware on the nutrition. So it's good to pay attention. Don't lose the focus there and put yourself first. So love yourself. Who cares about the peer pressure of, drink a bit more, eat a bit more? It's not worth it. At the end, you are fighting for you. We are kind of alone for some instance. So put your health first is my second advice. And this will also help in sport. And be resilient. That is easy to say, but small steps every day. Yeah, you don't complete Ironman or a half of Ironman on day 2. You start with a 2-kilometer run and then you build up. So like everything, just build up a bit. If showing up at the gym once a week is already something. Do 10 minutes of run is already something. Doesn't have to be an hour straight away. So don't have too much from yourself, and the results will arrive.
Yeah, start small indeed. Just get started. I mean, that's very important because it has so many benefits, right? Sports has so many benefits for diabetes, but we don't have to sugarcoat it. It will take work. It's not super easy to start doing sports with diabetes. It will be trial and error. Like you say, there will be failure, but as long as you can use that failure as a learning experience, it will help you to get better and to understand yourself better, to be more aware of what your body does when you're doing sports. That's the way you learn. So if you look at yourself, what are your goals now for the next year in sports science advocacy? Are you thinking of writing another book, maybe?
Yes, actually, I'm working on a book that will be a female oriented book. So, nutrition and sport for female with diabetes type 1. That is will be my next work. And I'm really excited to study more about that. I'm taking also a certification in sport nutrition for athletes in the University of Barcelona. In the meantime, I'm part of different foundations for advocacy, the Italian Foundation, the Dutch Foundation of Bas van der Goor, part of Impact, Innodia, and the Doc Voices. So I will be at some conference, scientific conference about diabetes with them. And race-wise, I think my triathlon training will keep going. In winter, I will shape it a bit more with some other sports, such as paddle, for example. I also dance on the side. I dance salsa. So I love it. It's something that, you don't have to perform. You just go there and your mind is zone out and it's really fun. In the meantime, I will keep my schedule of swimming twice a week, running twice a week, biking 2-3 times a week, bit of paddle, bit of salsa, and preparing another half Ironman race, I guess, for next year. I'm looking maybe a race in Spain. Barcelona could be one that I would like to do. And do better than last time. So use the strategy that I got, the learning that I got, the things that didn't go well in my race, that I talk about it in my book, and try, to do better.
Wow, a lot of exciting projects, and yeah, you will need a lot of time to do that all. But I wish you all the best, of course, Eleonora. Well,
Thanks.
time really flies when you're talking about something you're passionate about. But before we end our conversation, I would like to ask you just a few quick fire questions, just for fun, and you just give me a short answer after each question, if that's okay with you. So
Yeah.
here goes. So, what's your favorite discipline in triathlon? Swim, bike, or run?
Swim.
What's your go-to snack for blood sugar rescue when you're hypo?
I have glue cup gels that are Spanish brand that marathon runner told me to use with diabetes type 1.
Wow, should look into that. Espresso or cappuccino?
Cappuccino. I know I'm Italian, I should have espresso, but I love cappuccino.
Even in the afternoon?
Now that I'm in the Netherlands, but no one has to know, right? The Italian people don't see.
Do you prefer a solo workout or training with a group?
Training with the group. I love it. It motivates me so much.
Have you ever used your diabetes as an excuse to
Yeah,
get out of something?
multiple times. I entered some museum for free because I said I left like my insulin pen inside and I had to go. So I skipped a couple of, interrogation quiz saying that I was slow in school. I mean, I have to use the benefit of diabetes.
Good for you. Yes, you should. So, what's one type of training session that you really hate, but you still do?
Interval running, high intensity interval running. hated it. You suffer so much, but I still do it.
Exactly the same for me. Music, silence, or podcasts when you train?
Music when I train.
What type of music do you listen to?
So actually, I go for some like Avicii. I don't know the English.
Yes,
I say
Avicii, yeah.
Italian way. I usually go for this kind of music.
A morning or evening training, what's your favorite time to move?
Morning, I prefer it, although sometimes time-wise with work become evening training. I think morning is really nice and you get done with it.
What's one thing people often misunderstand about living with type 1 diabetes?
That you cannot eat sugar and yeah, they don't understand why you are having it all of a sudden and they look at your plate and they ask, why are you eating that? Why you're not eating that? Like, yeah, shut up, mind your own business.
Okay, you did great. How did you experience this conversation?
I really liked it, David, to be honest. It was really nice. I think like your question were so on spot. I hope this would be helping people, motivating people, inspiring people, someone that will go running or cycling right after and be like, yes, I can do it. I can reduce the sugar. I can be better in my breakfast. So this was the main aim and maybe someone else would like, to perfect their strategy. So I think this could be really good, really nice, I hope. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good message. You can do it, right? You can do it. Let's say that to all the type 1s out there. You can do it. Don't be afraid. If our listeners want to get in touch with you or find out more about your book, where can they find you online?
I have a Instagram open page that is called GlucoFit 360 because it's like the glucose management at 360 degrees. I post my sport that I do every day, my glucose graph, and what I do nutrition wise. Sometimes are good, sometimes are bad because diabetes is real. I don't want to pass like it's always good because it's not the truth. Yeah, and then you can reach me out on Instagram. I also have um a website, nutrition and sport with diabetes. So feel free to get in touch.
Well, I must say, I loved your story because it brings together science, endurance training, and lived experience in a very inspiring way. So, really, thank you so much for joining me today, Eleonora.
Thank you, David. Thanks to you.
Thanks for listening to Out of Range, the podcast that shares real stories from athletes living and thriving with type 1 diabetes. I hope today's conversation inspired you to get active, take control, and find your own balance in sport and in life. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and follow the show, or share it with someone who might benefit from hearing these stories. Every recommendation helps more people with type 1 diabetes discover the power of movement. And in the meanwhile, keep learning, keep moving, and keep your glucose in range.